You're listening to the Full and Thriving podcast, a place where courageous women come to break free from food obsession, heal their relationship with their body, and strive to live a life that's present, lighthearted, and meaningful. If you're listening, my wish is that this podcast serves as a catalyst that inspires you to nourish your body, nurture your mind, and energize your spirit. I'm your host, Meg McCabe, a certified life coach and eating disorder recovery coach with a PhD in having a good time. Just kidding about that last part. Anyway, thank you so much for listening and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Full and Thriving podcast. I am feeling so excited and so joyful and giggly already because I have a very special guest on the show. Her name is Ariana Rodriguez. She is an intuitive eating dietitian who specializes in eating disorder recovery. She is the co-founder of Embody Health London. And if you're on TikTok, she is one of the dancing dietitians who definitely caught my eye because I'm a big fan of dancing. And so Ariana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Meg. It's great to be here. I'm feeling giggly already too.
Good. You are so very welcome. I love the positive energy that you have. And I feel like anyone who is bold enough to just shake their booty on TikTok and teach what they're passionate about is someone I want to have on the show. So I'm really excited today. Just to begin, I know I gave a little intro already, but I'd love to hear about your journey and how you became an intuitive eating dietitian who specializes with eating disorders.
Yes. It's an important question, is how did I get to this point? Well, it's slightly different from perhaps other, anti-diet dietitians and specializing in eating disorders. But really where my journey got started was, where I was actually a competitive dancer for about the first 18 years of my life.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a huge piece of information I didn't realize, but it makes a lot of sense.
Right? It came to use at some point. Yeah. So I was a competitive dancer for quite some time. And during that time, I really was able to establish, the reason why nutrition is so important in my life. So luckily I had a very supportive mom who was always making sure, have your balanced meals and all these things. And so I was really able to start learning the importance of how nourishment impacts my day-to-day and how I feel, how I perform, and all of that. So that's really where nutrition came to play a big role in my life. And from there, I ended up kind of going into the health sciences and studying nutrition and dietetics. And when I was studying dietetics, that's really where, as many other dietitians probably agree with me, the diet culture was very much entrenched in what we were learning. And it was something that, eating disorders, maybe we had one module on eating disorders in our entire dietetic education. So there was really lack of depth in that kind of area. So I didn't know about eating disorders yet at that time. But what I did know was, hey, diet culture, this is diet culture and this is what dietitians do, right? So it was unfortunately quite a pigeonholed way of looking at nutrition. And so of course, when you graduate, I was very much in diet culture. And that's something that, I always, I have to be compassionate towards myself to kind of say, yes, okay, that's all you knew at the time. But long story short, I actually worked in weight management for quite some time. And I actually started seeing the impact that focusing on weight and diet culture has on people in terms of their psychology, how they feel in their bodies, and just the relationship they have with the external world because of it. And so I thought, red flag, something's going on here. This is not okay. So I did some digging, and luckily I had a mentor at the time who kind of showed me the intuitive eating book by lovely Elise Reich and Evelyn Triboulet. And when I read that book, that was kind of that aha moment for me. I was like, this is what I've been searching for. This is why it's not working. So from that moment on, I enrolled in the certification course, the Intuitive Eating Pros. So with Evelyn herself, and that's where I really got my certification. And I started doing some private work in eating disorders specifically, and that's where I really fell in love with that area. And then from there, I worked in a specifically adolescent, hospital, a unit where I was the lead dietitian for eating disorders. Worked there for a bit. Eventually, private work picked up, and I was, working with Cassie, my co-founder, and that's really where Embody Health London just started thriving. And I actually had to leave the hospital to be able to work in this area. So long-winded answer, but that's effectively my journey. Yeah.
Wow. Yes. Okay. What a beautiful journey. I love that when you were at a young age, you really knew the value of nourishing your body for performance. And it sounds like you didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, there weren't huge personal struggles in your personal world related to food and body image.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's it's a bit different than perhaps other dietitians or specialists in the area. And I used to kind of think like, oh, do I need to have struggled? But at the end of the day, it is a passion of mine, and it's something that I saw people around me struggling with, right? And especially in the dance world, similar to the fashion industry, I think it's something that's so entrenched in that way of thinking. If you have to be a certain kind of size to excel, and that's totally distorted and incorrect. And I think luckily it's because of the my mom being there and kind of giving me that guidance, and she's a natural intuitive eater, bless her, thankfully. And so that was really helpful in my journey. Yeah,
that is really beautiful and super awesome to hear. And I think dietitians who are trained in eating disorders, whether or not they had an eating disorder, it doesn't make a huge difference as long as you're properly trained. You stand for health at every size and intuitive eating. That's really great that there are people out there who are willing to help this really misunderstood population. So that's really awesome. And did your interest in helping people with eating disorders, how did that start?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my dearest friends in high school actually had an eating disorder. And so it was something I was exposed to from quite a young age. I knew about the struggles. So that was on my radar. I never knew much about it at the time, though, I have to say. Of course, being in high school, I was kind of in the dark. I'm like, what is going on here? She wouldn't accept compliments, even though I had loads to give. And so it was an interesting psychology that I was introduced to. And only later in my studies did I understand, okay, that's probably what was going on for her. But again, there was still not much depth given in my studies. And so that's where I think there was a little seed that was planted for me, because there was someone I cared deeply about. But then fast forward, it was very much when I was actually working in weight management that seeing the detrimental impact of, diet culture and shaping people's beliefs about themselves, and, eroding their sense of trust with their bodies. And, of course, eating disorders are much more complex than just merely diet culture. But if it was the one way that I was certainly exposed to the idea of psychology, food psychology, and understanding that. And that's really where I was so curious, and psychology is so interesting to me as well. So I think my interest in that fed into that, and the marrying of the two was very much, it just did it for me.
I could definitely see how working in a weight management facility would expose you to the disordered thinking.
So disordered.
The awful self-esteem and like reflection of worth based on size.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be really hard. And then also being in that, and then you as a person, instead of just following along, there was like red flags and sirens going on.
It just didn't sit well with me. I was like, gut feeling. Always trust your gut feeling. I was like, I have to get out of here. I have to pivot and find, another speciality that is really aligned with my values. And for me, I've always said, because that friend in high school and beyond, it's very much, if I can empower someone to feel better about themselves and learn to accept themselves, that is my life's mission.
That is a really powerful mission, and it's definitely part of the work. It's part of eating disorder recovery work.
It is. Yes. Yeah. It's a privilege.
I know we both wanted to talk a little bit about body image today, and I think this is a good kind of segue into that, because we were just talking about self-acceptance.
Yes.
So for someone who is really struggling with accepting their body and they're struggling with body image, what are some really easy ways to start shifting towards more of a body acceptance mindset?
Yeah. It is an interesting question, because when we think about body image, we often believe, and it's used to be thought that it was very much on a spectrum, not on a spectrum, rather, because it is on a spectrum. It used to be thought that it was dichotomous. So either you have positive body image or you have negative body image. And what we know now is that the research shows that's not necessarily the case, right? It's very much actually on a spectrum. It's fluid. It's something that changes, from day to day. So I always like to say the most confident person in the world still has bad body image days. So it's something that can change, and we can move it towards the more positive side through skills and practices that we'll kind of go through in a moment. But really the idea is that sometimes it may feel next to impossible for someone who has very poor body image or kind of is disconnected with their physical body to kind of consider self-love or body love, right? That can seem really radical as an idea. So the idea is remembering that it's actually on a spectrum. So we want to move you towards perhaps a more positive, but it's not to say we're going 0 to hero. It's thinking about how can we make this realistic and take baby steps to really help you shift towards a more neutral, more peaceful place, effectively.
Oh,
yeah.
the spectrum is so valuable. And when you can really digest the spectrum, like punny kind of word I just used, but like if you can really take in and know that there's a spectrum, and every day you're just reaching for the next best feeling, instead of jumping from 0 to 100, you can make more progress, and it feels so much more realistic and obtainable than just jumping from body super hate to super love.
Exactly. That would be unrealistic, and it can kind of be disheartening and overwhelming, and just make someone say, nope, never mind, I'm out. And that's not the idea here. So it is absolutely possible. So even if you are finding yourself, you are in a place mostly you have more days disliking your body and being unhappy living in your body than not, that can kind of shift. And what we want to see on a body image healing journey is having more days become kind of accepting, where you are accepting and you are enjoying living life in your body, right? So you are kind of returning home to your body. So that would be the ultimate aim. But in terms of ways that we can get started, is very much thinking about, well, there are a few different ways, but really it's thinking about how can I show my body some basic respect? So without having to think of, okay, saying affirmations, I love myself, it has to be realistic. If that's not something that resonates with you too much, of course, there's value in affirmations, totally. And self-talk is so, so powerful and important to address. But really thinking about, okay, like we said, baby steps. What is that first step we can take is, how can I show my body some basic respect? So even if we dislike someone, our neighbor, for example, or, some ex-enemy, friend, whatever it is, how can we just show them some basic respect, right? Because we would probably be at least cordial with them. So how can we do that with ourselves? Step one, right? And then that can build up to, okay, how can I accept myself in terms of maybe accepting my body for what it does for me every single day? So those would be some nice, really baby steps that we can take, is focusing on what your body does for you every day. So instead of thinking, oh, my legs, I absolutely hate them, I dislike my thighs, pinpointing on all these places, body checking, it's thinking about, actually, I dislike my thighs, and I am grateful that I have legs to get me from A to B, right? Wow. So it's how can we shift that mindset to add that, and so you're acknowledging the dislike, fine, sure, but we want to start trivializing it and moving towards body functionality. So that would be a really great place to perhaps get started.
Yeah, that's a really good example of acknowledging your thoughts and accepting your thoughts instead of resisting them. And I think there's so much pain in resisting the thought that you don't like your thighs, you're like, I hate my thighs. I shouldn't be hating my thighs. And it just like explodes into this mess where if you're just like, I dislike my thighs, and I am grateful for what they do and that I can be so strong or whatever it is, that is just such a better way to approach neutrality, even in your mind. Just like,
yes, exactly. Creating space for your emotions and how you feel, but then being able to use it in a more positive way. It's that reframe. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cultivating more peace within yourself, because I know when people have eating disorders, they're constantly against themselves. So maybe accepting how you feel about your body, but also acknowledging the good is a really good tip. So I love that one.
Great. It is a good one. Clients love it too.
What about body trust? I know that you've mentioned that. And I literally had a client session today where body trust was the topic, because diet culture gives you so much to be confused about. How do you kind of harness the beginnings of body trust in your life? Actually,
Yeah.
also, how would you define that? Because not everyone knows about that.
Yes, yes. Well, body trust is definitely something that needs to be practiced. So, what I always like to say is, in the same way that you start trusting your friend, right? Or let's say you start by not knowing someone, right? So, you haven't had quality time with yourself or this person. So, how do you get to build trust with them? And what I usually, at the end of the day, the answer is through small acts of kindness, by listening, by acknowledging. And these are the things that start building trust, a trusting relationship with people external from you. And then equally, we can apply that to that relationship that we actually have with ourselves. So, what diet culture, like you said so well, diet culture erodes that sense of trust with ourselves, because we're constantly being told, what your body is doing is wrong. Don't listen to your body. Let's listen to the external rules, the rules that these so-called diet gurus give to you, or influencers give to you, and that's when we start relying on other people to tell us what's right for us. When at the end of the day, if we go back years and years when we just came out of the womb, we knew what we needed. Right. So we are meant to know what we need. It's really just we can get disconnected over time through socialization and all of that, so much cultural stuff that comes into it. How, just rules that come in that weave into our day to day through movies and social media. I mean, so many things. But ultimately, what we want to start doing is reconnecting with I like to call it the inner compass, is recalibrating our inner compass, right? Because instead of being externally referenced, we need to start coming back to, what do I need right now? What is it that I'm feeling right now? So body trust is not only related to the food that we eat, but it's very much building a relationship with our emotions as well, and acknowledging what emotional needs we have as well. And so it's very complex, but I think there's so much work that needs to be done to be able to build body trust, in the sense that first things first is, let's create space for ourselves, because often we're so distracted. We're trying to suppress emotions. We're moving away. We're trying to sweep them under the rug. And it's thinking about, okay, actually, can I label my emotion? How am I actually feeling right now? And what is it that I actually need? Do I need to seek support? Do I need to just call a friend for a chat? Do I need to maybe journal this out? So it's thinking about what your needs are. And the more you start meeting them, what we'd expect to see is a bit more of that awareness to know. And effectively, when we have that awareness, we can start building trust that, okay, I'm understanding my body a bit more. I'm understanding myself and my thoughts and my mind. And that can be something that can be cultivated. And then equally, on the other side, of course, building body trust can be related to food, right? In terms of, on an intuitive eating kind of frame point. So the idea there is, again, coming back to thinking about, okay, your hunger and your fullness. Of course, if we're living with an active eating disorder, just as a little caveat there, is depending on where we're at with that, we need to be careful that we may not always be able to rely yet on our hunger and fullness cues. If there's any trauma that's been experienced, if there's been any type of long-term dieting, sometimes we've lost that connection. So the first thing to get started with would be self-care. And that's where you can start building really, really great sense of trust with your body, is by giving it what it needs.
Wow. I, first of all, have never really thought about body trust the way, like, I'm taking it back to what you first said, bringing it back to how would you build trust with a person and a friend? It's like acknowledge that person's needs and
Right.
accept their needs and listen to them. It's like exactly what you need to do for your emotions and your physical body is just start acknowledging those things. So that's really cool. And I definitely see the link how if you can start acknowledge, like, there's so many links to food. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be this direct behavior change with food. It can be I'm
Yes.
going to start taking care of my physical body by self-care, and
Mhm.
that's going to build trust that may carry over to trusting myself to feed my body and listen to my body's needs. That's really powerful to see that crossover.
Yes, it's so interlinked, right? We can't kind of separate them, the food with mind and body. It's really all so related.
Mm-hmm. I know that with some clients I work with, they come to me with total confusion about their body, but also confusion about their needs.
Yes, yes. I get that too. It's kind of thinking, well, what do I need? Because I've never actually considered it.
Yeah, I've never considered what I need physically. I don't know
Yes.
what I want to eat. I don't know what I like to eat. So asking yourself, what
Yeah.
do I want, is actually very powerful. Saying, what do I want? And then actually taking action to allow yourself to have that thing or do that
Yes,
thing.
yes, absolutely. Because you are worthy of doing what you want, of getting what you want. And it's really a journey to be able to build up to that. If you're not ready yet and it seems overwhelming, it's kind of coming up with some realistic goals in order to get you there.
Mhm.
Yes. And self-care can seem, quite overwhelming for some if they haven't necessarily done that yet or they haven't paid time, given themselves the time to do that. So I mean, self-care can look different for every single person, but I always like to say it doesn't have to be bubble baths and candlelit, candlelit bubble baths and face mask. I mean, that would be I love that. I am definitely team bubble bath. But it doesn't always have to be. I have had some clients that hate baths. So it's like, okay, maybe not for you. But then we can consider what would be nice. What do you consider being relaxing, right? Or stepping away from the kind of day to day where it can be quite busy or you're in your thoughts is how can we move away and give yourself space. Sometimes it means as just going to bed an hour earlier. That is a form of self-care that we don't want to neglect either.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what your body needs. How's your sleep quality? Maybe can we improve that, right? So that could be a nice little baby step too.
Mhm.
Meditation, doing 2 minutes or 5 minutes a day, starting small and building up, giving yourself space.
Really helpful advice there because there's so much you can do to build body trust and self-esteem by not related to food and not related super to, like, not directly related to your body, like just taking 10 minutes to read a book might
Yeah.
help you start trusting yourself, like, look at me take care of myself. If I can take my care of my mental health and intellectual health, I can take care of my physical body.
Exactly. So well said. Yes.
Yes, I love that. Super awesome. Bring it back because I know you have more tips. I just want to know,
Always so many.
what about body image again? I know you mentioned some really helpful advice before, and then I shifted to body trust. So when it
Yes.
comes to body
It's great.
image, what other pieces of advice do you have for someone who's like really stuck and trying to heal their body image?
Yeah. Well, a few tips. So I'll share a few top favorites. With the body image, when you're getting started on this journey, it's also thinking about how how is it that self-care is actually going to be one of those things, is being able to give yourself space for self-care. So that's certainly one tip. Secondly, it's thinking about how you're talking to yourself every single day, right? So can we make note of that self-talk that you're having? Is it really nagging? Is it this inner critic? How can we turn that volume down, right? And maybe what we need to start doing is reframing these types of thoughts that we're having, that kind of self-talk. It's thinking about, okay, you know, if I'm saying myself, oh, I hate myself. I look ugly. I feel terrible. Oh, this is just awful. And kind of repeating that on repeat. It's almost like on a hamster wheel, right? So we have to kind of step off that hamster wheel so that it stops spinning a little bit, cool down. And one way to start doing that is kind of reframing those negative thoughts. So how can you use those? If you notice, right, I would say, sorry, write down, right? So write down those negative thoughts that you're having in terms of that self-talk, right? When you journal, so self-talk, write down the journaling. And then it's a few steps. And then once you journal that down is how can you reframe that self-talk? So that's what you start repeating to yourself daily. For some people, it may be really, really challenging to do this in the mirror, but ultimate goal would be doing some mirror talk. But perhaps to get started, really just saying these things out loud so that you can really start embedding them into your neurology is really reciting these, because once you repeat something long enough, you can start believing it. So it doesn't mean you believe it just yet, but at least you can reshift. And what I would say is when we reframe, rather than making it something, like we said, similar to that fluid body image kind of spectrum, it's not something that we want to be realistic. We don't want to go all the way to, I love myself today, even though we're not feeling that, right? Because that can be a bit trivial. It becomes a bit just, it doesn't really mean anything, right? So we want to move towards maybe neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we use a more neutral kind of self-talk? So I don't feel great today, and that's okay. But I'm grateful that I get to see the sunrise today, for example. So it's really just kind of trying to bring it back. And when we think of self-talk and reframing, bringing in an element of gratitude could be really, really helpful. So I would say, so in a nutshell, some mirror work could be helpful, right? So thinking about, okay, what can I accept? What am I okay with? Second is thinking about just reframing from a different perspective, right? So looking almost like, I like to say, like being a fly on the wall. So if you were outside of your body, being a fly on the wall, what would you be observing? How can we see it from a different perspective? And then, of course, the body functionality that we did talk about earlier is really important. So adding the and kind of statement, right? So I dislike my thighs, and I'm grateful that they allow me to walk from A to B, right? So that's another one. And then it's important to wear comfortable clothes. If you're not feeling great in your body, it's thinking about how can I at least be comfortable, more comfortable in my body right now. So that's going to be an important one. Cleaning out your social media feed. Let's be honest.
Yes,
that can be really, really triggering if we're kind of working on ourselves and we're just seeing all of these triggering, influencers and bikinis where we're finding ourselves comparing ourselves to these people. Then that's not going to be constructive. So can we clean up the feed as well? And then lastly, I would say your support system. Who are you surrounding yourself with? Right? Are they constructive? Are they bringing positivity? Are they empowering, or are they kind of pulling you down and maybe not supporting you on this journey? So just choosing and picking who you spend your time with, and knowing that it's okay to set boundaries and that it's okay to say, no, not today. I'm just going to do something else. Making sure that, you are worthy of choosing how you spend your time. Absolutely.
Those are really awesome, helpful tips. I'm really appreciative of everything you just said. You're like an encyclopedia of body image tips.
You're so funny.
That's really cool. I wanted to ask you more specifically about reframing thoughts.
Yes.
How might someone start practicing reframing thoughts? I know you mentioned gratitude and using the and trick.
Yes.
Is there anything that how do you approach the thought? Like if you write down a negative body image thought, like,
yes,
my tummy is super bloated and I look big today or whatever. Or I look horrible today, or whatever that would be. How would you approach the thought? Like if you write it down, then what? What can you do?
Yeah. Great question. So what I often like to do is I'll encourage my clients to state and write down, like you said, because the journaling is a really powerful tool there. So we can use it to our advantage, is write down that negative body, that thoughts. So like you said, I don't like my tummy. It's too big, for example. And then under that, you're going to write 3 different ways that you can actually look at, your tummy. So, and that can be, so again, like that fly on the wall. So how would someone else who's more neutral or objective be able to see the situation? What would they say? Or, if it was a friend that was saying that to you, right? And saying that about herself, what would you tell her or him? So those are kind of ways that we can start using those types of considerations to then inspire our reframe. So that may be something like, you may be uncomfortable with your tummy today, but it allows you to digest food and nourish you and absorb really important nutrition, right? Or this discomfort is temporary, or so it can be different ways that we can be kind of going at it.
Yes.
If
that's perfect. That's what I was looking for, something to see, like, okay, it really looks like there's a valuable perspective shift you could potentially take on. It's like you swap brains with another perspective. Like, what would my best friend say? I actually have this, I do this with my clients in a similar thought, like when you shift perspectives, like, what would a feminist say about your tummy today? What would an athlete, or I don't know, like whatever is useful, what would a comedian say? Right. Add some levity to it, or whatever, whatever perspective is useful for you in that moment can be super powerful.
That's a fun exercise. I like that. Yeah, let's trivialize it.
Yeah, right. Like, what would your sarcastic brother say? What would what would a chef say? Like, different things.
Yes. Yeah.
You can jump in and then you can just take one of their thoughts. Just use it for yourself.
Let's borrow that one. Let's just keep that one in our pocket. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So just use it for yourself. So that's really, really interesting stuff. Wow. You are just...
It's so powerful. I mean, there's so many ways you can do it, but really, I think getting started with writing, and the key is the 3. It's the power of 3 is what we call it, right? So it's 1 negative thought, 3 more neutral ones, right? So let's smash that negative thought.
That's a really good framework to work from. It's like, don't just give it 1 thought. Let's just beat it down with 3 neutral.
Exactly. 3 against 1.
Outnumbered.
It's not going to stand.
It has no chance at that point.
Yeah.
No chance.
Yeah.
And you have to be intentional about it. And that's the thing. Yeah. Like, you can have these negative thoughts spinning through your head if that feels good to your subconscious that day. Like, nobody's stopping you from engaging in these negative thoughts. You have to be intentional about wanting to stop the thoughts, wanting to pick a new thought, wanting to challenge the thought. It's really up to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Ariana, you are just such a bright light, so helpful. It's been a real pleasure. Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you, how can everyone reach out to you if they are inspired to stay connected to you?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at nutritionari, ARI, short for Ariana. And you can also find me on Twitter at nutritionari. And you can also find me at my clinic, which is Embody Health London. So it's at Embody, EMBODY Health London _ on Instagram. And you did mention TikTok earlier, so I have to make a shout out. If you want to see some dancing dietitians that are having a good time and really out to empower you to live your best life and heal your relationship with your body and food, then ultimately definitely find us at Embody Health London LDN on TikTok. And it would be so great to connect with your listeners.
Awesome. Yes, I'm sure they're going to want to see some dance videos and get some inspiration. That's awesome. Thanks again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Meg.
You're so welcome.
We will chat soon. More time for giggles. Absolutely.
Definitely. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.